All right, so I am really delighted about this panel because I get to interview two people who just did amazing Giving Tuesday campaigns, and I'm a total fangirl of both of theirs. So I am delighted to bring them out. Cecilia and Sarah, will you come join me? Please welcome Cecilia Clark, who is the president and CEO of the Brooklyn Community Foundation, and Sarah Heminger, who is the CEO of Thread, which is an amazing Baltimore nonprofit. And I'll let them tell you a little bit more about what their organizations do and specifically what they did for Giving Tuesday. So I referenced in the beginning of this whole town hall our community campaigns, which can be everything from an entire state like Maryland or Illinois to a tiny town like Newton, Kansas, or Bethel, Alaska, which I referenced, and how much those are a celebration of those specific communities. And what Cecilia and Sarah achieved on Giving Tuesday was the same thing, where they were really innovative, creative campaigns that really captured the spirit of their individual communities. So, Cecilia, I'll start with you.
Sure.
All right, and tell us a little bit about all of it.
Just want to make sure that the right slide.
Yep, you can see it there too.
Thank you. So the context here is Brooklyn Community Foundation is a community foundation. Community foundations are place-based philanthropies that build charitable assets to meet community need. And I joined Sadie Nash in 2009. And one of the things, Brooklyn Community Foundation, when I got to Brooklyn Community Foundation, they had just done a survey with all of the grantees. And the takeaway from that survey was Brooklyn Community Foundation doesn't stand for anything.
Ouch.
Ouch, right. So, and I'm the new CEO. That's quite a charge.
Nowhere to go but up.
Right, what?
Nowhere to go but up.
Nowhere to go but up. Well, a little bit, yes. So, but kind of a beautiful thing too, right? Because to have meaning, of course, is everything. So I actually shut down the foundation's grant making for 6 months, and we did a project called Brooklyn Insights. So I'm just gonna actually go ahead. What do we stand for? So we did this project called Brooklyn Insights. It was gonna be a video, and I'm gonna skip over the video, but we ended up constructing this project, and there's a website for it. It was really quite exciting. For 6 months, we talked to over 1,000 people in Brooklyn, including residents, activists, city workers. They were all Brooklynites in a very, very targeted kind of questioning, listening project to try to learn what we should do as Brooklyn's Community Foundation. So I'm saying this because what was really important is rather than playing a more traditional role of philanthropy, which is kind of going inward and saying, this will be our project, we went outward and said, what should we stand for? What should our project be? So out of Brooklyn Insights, we emerged with 5 themes. We've been working on those themes. And we, in fact, do stand for something. And our vision is a fair and just Brooklyn. This is our new mission statement, which is a mission to spark. I'm going to come back to that word, spark lasting social change, mobilizing people, capital, and expertise for a fair and just Brooklyn. So this is what we stand for. We have a very strong racial justice commitment. Racial justice is a theme that we practice throughout both our grant making and our institutional focus. So last year, and through a variety of programs, we do participatory grant making. We have a youth-led grant making program. So we've continued this ethos of going out into the community and allowing the community to participate in the work of the foundation, which we really feel like should be the role of the borough's community foundation. So last year, we launched an award called the Spark Prize. I'm skipping over this, Spark Prize. We launched the Spark Prize. And the reason we launched the Spark Prize is because we wanted to celebrate Brooklyn nonprofits. It should be noted that Brooklyn is the 4th largest city in the United States if it were a city. My catchment area is 2.6 million people, and yet only 4% of New York's philanthropic dollars actually make it to Brooklyn. So what we felt as the Borough's Community Foundation was we really need to shine a light on these phenomenal nonprofits working on the front lines every day and not really leveraging the philanthropy they could in New York City. So we launched the Spark Prize, and in fact, we use outside experts to do the judging. We have a panel of about 30 committee members, so we kind of continued that tradition. And we basically got 150 applications. We got them to 20 finalists. And we thought, but the winners are 5 winners, and each winner gets 100,000 each. So we thought, we have to show the 20 finalists some love. And so we built a Giving Tuesday around these 20 finalists. And the 20 finalists found out in October that they were the finalists. We put up a $5,000 match to each of them, so $100,000. We trained them in a Giving Tuesday, how to maximize this match. We renamed it Brooklyn Gives. It was hashtag Brooklyn Gives, so it's Giving Tuesday, but the brand was Brooklyn Gives. We used Brooklyn Industries. We used a number. We partnered with the Brooklyn Chamber. And we did videos for each of the 20. So if you go to the Spark Prize, you can see these beautiful video profiles of all of these amazing 20 organizations doing their work. And on that day, for the first time out, we raised almost $300,000 from almost 1,000 donors. And 19 out of 20 of the finalists made the match. And all of them said they had raised more money as a Spark finalist and doing Giving Tuesday than they ever had before. And this is a first time out. So, we enlisted businesses, Spark Prize, the committee members were involved. So it really was an effort that was connected to Spark Prize, but also to send a signal that said, the Brooklyn Community Foundation wants to support its borough, but we're going to take it outside to the community to help us do that.
And were the 20 nonprofits kind of similar in size, operating budget?
Different. Some were, you had to have a minimum budget of $350 to apply to Spark, and you had to be at least 5 years old. So we were not funding fledgling startups. We very much thought, part of the 4 criteria were born in Brooklyn or serving Brooklyn, strong values, racial justice lens, and a vision for your future, which doesn't have to be growth, but it just means involvement. But it is a no strings attached $100,000 prize. So it was competitive. We just closed the last round. We have about 140 applications, so we have our work cut out for us. And hopefully we'll be able to build on Brooklyn Gives.
And presumably those organizations are better organizations because of the capacity building kind of exercise.
Well, there were a number of interesting outcomes. One thing is some of the Spark Prize committee members learned about these organizations for the first time and gave their own money. And then also through those matches, through the Brooklyn Gives matches, they also leveraged donors that they had never met for themselves. Because for Brooklyn Gives, you could either give directly to the nonprofit, because you love them for whatever reason, or you could give to us, and we would distribute it evenly to the 20. So a lot of people, thought, I've never heard of this organization, this video is amazing, and would just give directly to that nonprofit. And then that really becomes the donor that belongs to that nonprofit.
Amazing. All right. Sarah, how about you? I'm getting a ton of questions for you, Cecilia, but we'll come back to you.
Well, I work with an organization called Thread, and we are a community building organization. When you think about in our core work, what is the problem we're trying to solve? If you look at a city like Baltimore or most American cities, what's interesting is we're actually more segregated than we were, say, in 1964. So when you think about the progress of the civil rights movement, there's been a lot done in terms of the logos, a lot of legislation passed, not nearly enough, but a lot. But when you think about the ethos of the civil rights movement, do people actually know each other? Do they actually understand that their futures are inextricably tied to one another? Do you actually see yourselves in your neighbor? I don't believe that has happened. And as a result, we're now segregated as a city, both by race and now by class. So we're more segregated than ever before. If you speak to young people in East Baltimore, for example, at Dunbar High School, people that were in the class in 1961 will tell you, I knew, even though it was a segregated all African-American high school, I knew people who were lawyers, doctors, sanitation workers, teachers. There was a huge diversity in the social capital, both geographically in the neighborhoods, in the schools, and in the church and religious communities. That does not exist today. What we have is concentrated racial segregation as well as class segregation. So what Thread's trying to do is actually put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So how do you actually get people to come together and get to know one another? The way we do it is we enroll high school freshmen, students that rank in the bottom 25% of their class. To give you a sense of what I mean by that, Douglas High School, the school that was at the epicenter of the unrest in Baltimore in 2015, our average GPA of our first incoming cohort was 0.15 on a 4.0 scale. So not 1.5, but 0.15. Our students are exemplary individuals that are in extraordinary situations where they are often distracted by immeasurable things outside of the classroom. So once they're enrolled in Thread, they stay with us for a decade and become family. So the rest of high school, 6 years after high school, and we lovingly joke it's, it lasts longer than your average American marriage. So it's quite the commitment both for the students and for us. And then once they're in Thread, the key thing is, like a gang or a sorority, once you're in, you cannot get out. We do not unenroll students. And that is core to doing what we're trying to do, which is build true, permanent, community built-in, mutual and meaningful relationships. Once in, each student has up to 5 volunteers. The 5 volunteers do anything you do for your own child. So we are not a mentoring or tutoring program. We do those things, but we also pick students up for school. We pack their lunches. We make sure that they have clean clothes. It's a lot easier to go to school if you're not hungry because someone has brought you breakfast. It is a lot easier to go to school when you have a ride and don't have to take 3 buses. And it's a lot easier to go to school if you have clean clothes and are not worried about being teased because you smell bad. So that's the core of our work. What transformed kind of things in the last couple years, though, was when the unrest happened. I was sitting in a series of meetings and I walked out and I saw a bajillion texts on my phone from a young man named Maurice. And he was basically alerting us to that all this was about to happen over in West Baltimore. And 14 hours later, we had located a couple hundred students, made sure everyone had gotten home or somewhere safe. And then we spent the next few days just going deep, trying to make sure that all of our students and our volunteers were not just physically safe, but like psychologically dealing with what had happened. And what came out of a conversation on my porch at my house was anger. Our kids were really, really angry. And the reason they were angry was they felt like people swept in from places outside of West Baltimore, brought bottled water, brought carrots and celery and food. And they did it for a couple weeks until Geraldo and all the news cameras left, and then they left with them. And so there was this deep sense of resentment of that there was something transactional that had happened and a missed opportunity for something transformational to have happened in our city. And so one of our young people said, well, what if everyone had just gotten the phone number of one person they had never met before and agreed to talk to them on the phone once a month for a year? Like, how would that have changed our entire community and our ability to see ourselves in one another? So you can't do over the unrest, but what we did do was we spent the next year doing an arc of 5 different events to bring together 1,000 strangers across Baltimore. So we started with Giving Tuesday in 2015, where we asked people to just log an action that strengthened or sparked a relationship. Over 1,100 people logged actions ranging from I bought a stranger a cup of coffee to I called my mom and forgave her after not speaking to her for over a decade. Our board matched that with a monetary match. So for every 10 actions logged, a board member gave $1,000. So we were also fortunate to raise over $100,000 through that campaign. We then did a series of dinners. So we had 100 dinners at 100 different homes on one night with 10 people each. So the hosts of those dinners did not know the people showing up at their house. The people showing up at their house did not know the host. The idea was to bring people together in a way that was intimate and meaningful and real. And then we followed that up a few months later with 10 dinners at my home with 100 people each. So you saw the 9 people you saw the first night and 90 more. And then we followed that up with a dinner where all 1,000 people gathered. And what they did was they gathered to plan the actions that they would do to strengthen our city on Giving Tuesday 2016. So this past year on Giving Tuesday, we had thousands of people all across our city doing things to support building relationships in a mutual and meaningful way. And they did it with a group of people that they had gotten to know over the course of a year. I'll just share with you one probably the most of all things that happened during this arc, the most meaningful thing was a young man, Imhotep, was leaving my house after one of the dinners, and he said, "Thank you so much for having me over." And I didn't really think anything of it. Most people would come and say, "Thank you for having me to your home." And he said, "No, no, 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 no." And this is a 25-year-old African-American man, he said, no, you're actually only the second white person's house I've ever been to. He's like, I work with white people, I hang out with white people, I go to school with white people, but white people don't invite me to their house. And I was like, well, who's the other white person's house you've been to? And he said, Nick Greer, which was the dinner he had gone to with 10 people a few months earlier. And it really struck me, like when you think about like where we are, we're so connected on social media, online, we're all sitting together in rooms, but like, are you actually talking to people? Are you really getting to know one another? Are you actually building relationships that like are transformational, not just in someone else's life, but in your own? And I think those are the lessons we learned from going through this very unusual experience for Thread.
Yeah. So we have tons of questions. I just want to answer the first one myself, actually. Many communities need a model like Thread. Is it scalable, or do you think each community needs to design their own solution? I love this question because I mention Thread a lot in conversation when people say to me that one of the effects that Giving Tuesday is having is that they feel pressured to be more innovative and more collaborative and more creative every single year. Like how can they lift the bar any higher? And I say, just steal someone's great idea and do it. You don't have to think of a completely unique idea, and Thread is one of those. I would love to see a Thread happening in every single state in Giving Tuesday this year, and I know that you feel the same way, Sarah. So I would say it is an eminently scalable idea. Cecilia, I want to ask you a question that is a really interesting one. Why would you do it on Giving Tuesday and not have your own Giving Day at a separate time of year?
Part of it was the timing of the award. It takes a long time for a committee of 30 people to process 150 applications, so we kind of arrived at fall. But I also just think we could capitalize on all the great organizing that had already been done around Giving Tuesday and the incredible work that everyone's done. So that's why we kind of rebranded it Brooklyn Gives, but made it clear to everybody that this is in fact attached to a national effort. So I think that's probably the best reason I can give. A lot of community foundations do giving days that they do not attach to Giving Tuesday, but we didn't want to do that.
Got it, and we're glad. And so, Sarah, a couple of questions about how a smaller nonprofit ties Giving Tuesday in with an end-of-year appeal.
It's actually interesting. We didn't. So what we're trying to do is tear down the traditional notion that there's a group of haves and have-nots, a group of people who are there to come and save and be saved. And oftentimes, money really plays into that power dynamic where it's somehow valued differently than other types of capital, human capital, social capital. And so we didn't tie it. So Thread actually has policies. We don't do traditional fundraising. So we don't do solicitations. We don't do financial asks. We don't do end-of-year campaigns. What we do is we build community. We focus on actually supporting whether it's our students, our volunteers, donors, collaborators, staff, board, and going through their own individual evolution of growth. So for example, for our volunteers, the statement when volunteers enter Thread is, it's not about the student. It's about my own ability to grow and change. It's not about, did the kid go to school? It's about, if you said you were going to drive them to school, did you drive them to school, right? And so that type of journey is something that not only our students go through, but everyone in Thread. And our belief is if you really build a true community where the authenticity is there, the community will support itself, whether it's financially support itself with time and volunteering, pro bono expertise. So we've taken kind of a totally different approach. On the other hand, what I will say is a number of organizations met individuals and foundations at the dinners, at the series of dinners, and they received substitute funding from some of the individuals that they met. So that was a huge outcome for us, which is when you're really trying to create an integrated and equitable city, it's about how you share. It's not about the institution of Thread, it's about the city of Baltimore, and it's how do we create that social capital in a way that benefits everybody. And so it was really cool to see, young people get jobs from people they met at dinner, and people donate money to other organizations, but we didn't do any sort of formal end-of-year campaign as a follow-up.
Well, I could talk to you guys forever, but we are out of time. Thank you for the amazing work you do and being led by your communities and listening to them so well.
Thank you.
Thank you.